In this lecture, we are going to go over the 7 GDPR principles. These are lawness, fairness, and transparency. And yes, that's all one. Purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, and accountability. Most of these will be very familiar to you as we've reviewed them as part of the Fair Information Practices and seen them elsewhere. As with other long strings of words we need to memorize for the CIPP US, I have put these 7 principles into a mnemonic device to help us remember them for the exam. And our mnemonic device for the GDPR principles is: llamas paraded drowsily as Smurfs imploded accidentally. And if you look to your right here, you'll see we have 3 llamas who are, or at least were, parading down the road drowsily until all of a sudden their Smurf companions began imploding, completely unannounced, of course. And it was not part of my planning that the insides, the guts of Smurfs would be rainbow colored. But that's just the way that things worked out. And you know what? I really like that splash of color. So there we go. Llamas paraded drowsily as Smurfs imploded accidentally. And just here I've put together the 7 GDPR principles and lined them up with that mnemonic device. Let's go through each of these 7 principles in turn. And in most cases, again, I think the thinking, the concepts, the ideas here are pretty intuitive. For lawness, fairness, and transparency, the lawfulness here indicates that data processing requires legal authority and basis. And if you think back to the previous lecture on what is the GDPR, you saw that one of the requirements for data controllers is that they have legal authority for their collection. And here that's lawfulness. Fairness means that data subjects must be informed. And with regards to transparency, data controllers want to ensure that their communications are concise, accessible, and in plain language. Purpose limitation should be familiar to us by now. Here we mean that general collections must be specified, explicit, and legitimate, and must comply with the law. For any uses of data that build upon the original purpose of collection, that secondary processing must be compatible with the relationship between the original and secondary collection, the type of data and safeguards, and must be consistent with the data subject expectation and impact. And just to fill this out a little bit more, we may have a situation where a company collects data for one use, and as they're in business or as they respond to consumer demand for their product, they discover that there's an additional similar use that would benefit their business and would benefit the consumer. And so when we have data that we've collected for one reason and we're going to be using for a second or further reasons, businesses want to make sure that the secondary processing is compatible with the first and meets these criteria. Permitted exceptions to purpose limitation are archiving data in the public's interest, or for scientific and historical research. For data minimization, we're collecting only the data that's required for our business need, and at the same time, we're deleting data once it's no longer needed, or retaining only as long as necessary. Accuracy. We want to ensure that data is correct and complete, and that correction is permitted as necessary. Storage limitation. This means that data is retained no longer than necessary. We're not holding on to something in case we come up with a good idea later. Once the data is processed and no further use is necessary, that data is disposed of. The sixth of the 7 GDPR principles is integrity and confidentiality. And again, this is a twofer. Integrity and confidentiality together make up one principle. And both integrity and confidentiality in this case correspond to our understanding in the CIA triad. You'll remember that confidentiality means that data is accessed only by authorized personnel, and that with regards to integrity, the data is accurate, complete, and tamper-proof. For accountability, this means that the data controller is responsible for being able to demonstrate compliance with these principles, with the 6 that preceded this. And examples of accountability would be documenting breaches, providing user access and amendment, having adequate record keeping, and conducting data protection impact assessments, DPIAs. In this lecture, we have reviewed the 7 GDPR principles. They are lawfulness, fairness, and transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, and accountability. And our mnemonic device to help us remember these is llamas paraded drowsily as Smurfs imploded accidentally.